Imagine waking up one morning, starting a war, and losing before you've even finished breakfast. No, seriously. The shortest war in recorded history lasted somewhere between 38 and 45 minutes, depending on who you ask. That's shorter than most YouTube videos. This is the story of the shortest war in history. Our story takes place in 1896 on the island of Zanzibar, off the east coast of Africa. At the time, Zanzibar wasn't fully controlled by Britain, but Britain had a lot of influence there. Think of it like that one friend who insists they're not telling you how to play the game while constantly standing behind you saying, "You should probably do that." Britain wanted a ruler who would cooperate with them. And that's where the trouble starts. On August 25th, 1896, the Sultan of Zanzibar suddenly died. Almost immediately, a man named Khalid bin Bargash declared himself the new sultan. The problem? Britain didn't approve. Under agreements that had already been made, a new sultan needed British approval before taking power. Khalid's response was essentially, "That's nice, I'm doing it anyway." He marched into the palace, declared himself ruler, and settled in. The British were not thrilled. They demanded that Khalid step down. He refused. They demanded again. He refused again. At this point, Britain decided words weren't working very well. So they sent warships into Zanzibar harbour. Big warships, the kind that make you suddenly start rereading any threatening letters you've recently sent. The British then delivered an ultimatum: leave the palace, step down, or face military action. The deadline was set for 9 o'clock in the morning on August 27th. As the deadline approached, Khalid still refused to leave. Instead, he gathered around 3,000 supporters, soldiers, palace guards, and servants around the palace. Now, if you're wondering what his plan was against one of the most powerful empires on earth at the time, you're not alone. Because historians aren't entirely sure either. Maybe he hoped Britain was bluffing. Maybe he expected negotiations. Or maybe he looked out the window at several heavily armed warships and thought, "Nah, I'd win." Either way, the clock kept ticking. 9 a.m. arrived. Khalid did not surrender. At approximately 9:02 a.m., the British opened fire. And when I say opened fire, I don't mean a warning shot. I mean full-scale bombardment. Cannons roared, shells smashed into the palace, buildings caught fire, walls began collapsing. The defenders tried to fight back, but they were completely outmatched. One of Zanzibar's ships, the Royal Yacht, attempted to join the battle. The British sank it almost immediately, which technically qualifies as participating, just not successfully. Meanwhile, the palace was being shredded by artillery. The defenders were overwhelmed. The situation was rapidly changing from military resistance to extremely expensive demolition project. At some point during the chaos, Khalid decided he had experienced enough war for one lifetime. So he escaped through the back of the palace and fled. Honestly, probably the smartest decision he made all week. The bombardment continued for less than an hour. At around 9:40 a.m., the palace flag was lowered. And just like that, the war was over. Total duration, about 38 minutes. That's it. The entire conflict started, unfolded, and ended in less time than it takes some people to choose a movie on Netflix. The casualties were not exactly balanced. Britain suffered only one injured sailor. One. Meanwhile, hundreds of people on the Zanzibar side were killed or wounded. After the fighting ended, Britain installed the ruler they preferred and quickly restored control. As for Khalid, he managed to escape capture and lived for many years afterward. Which is impressive considering the spectacular way his attempt to seize power had gone. And that's how the shortest war in recorded history came to an end. 38 minutes. Some people spend longer deciding what to order for lunch. To this day, the Anglo-Zanzibar War still holds the record for the shortest war ever fought. A title that has remained unbeaten for more than a century. Because if your war lasts less than 38 minutes, at that point it barely counts as a war. It just means you got into an argument with the British Navy and immediately discovered why that was a terrible idea.